Oh, that was nice of them. They think that's going to make the sermon shorter. Oh, all right. Yeah. Well, now I'm going to add to it. So get comfortable, folks. Oh, my gosh. You put your feet up. That's right, Melanie. So imagine these people, these ancient people who are traveling a desert. They're tired. They're thirsty. They left Egypt, and one of their mentors, somebody that was really important to them, Miriam, just died. And in Jewish tradition, Miriam was not just a prophetess. She had her own prophetic voice, but the people felt that a well of water traveled with them through this wilderness, and they always had enough to drink, which, by the way, there's more water if you're feeling hot. It's still over there in the back. We want you to stay safe. So Miriam's well would travel along with all of these Israelites, and when she died, the well disappeared. It didn't carry on without her. And it didn't take long for those Israelites, who are often referred to as stiff-necked, a little stubborn. So it's not just us. This is part of our history. These Israelites were getting frustrated and more frustrated and more frustrated. And the Torah says the community was without water, and they challenged Moses and Aaron, called them terrible names. And they say to them, they challenge them, they say to them, why did you bring us here? These former slaves, and now their descendants, are saying to Moses and Aaron, why did you bring us here? It wasn't that they wanted to get out of slavery. It wasn't that God brought them out here. It was them. And Moses and Aaron fall on their faces shortly after this. They take this verbal attack, and God is going to give instructions to Moses and to Aaron, and the instructions are, take the rod that we've seen in all of the movies, take the rod, the one that has God's power in it, and go to this rock that's over there and order it to bring out water. So Moses and Aaron go over, and they see this rock, and Moses and Aaron, they're feeling exhausted and depleted. They're taking all of these hits from their congregation, their people that they were leading through this wilderness. And Moses loses his cool and hits a rock twice. Now remember, God says, take your rod, this staff, like a shepherd uses, because Moses is shepherding God's people. Take this rod, bring it over to the rock, and tell the rock, order the rock, direct the rock, don't hit the rock. But Moses loses his cool, and he not only hits it, he hits it twice. And as a result, Jewish tradition is very clear that Moses doesn't get to go into the land of Israel because he's lost this power of leadership, or maybe he lost his own faith, or maybe he forgot who's really in control. He wasn't listening to God. He didn't direct the rock. He hit it twice, and so that's his punishment. Okay. Some of us never thought that was super cool, that maybe God overreacted. Zap. That maybe Moses didn't really deserve such a consequence for something like this. But there's something else that strikes me. It's one of the commentaries in the Talmud. It says that when a prophet loses when that prophet loses his temper, his gift of prophecy abandons him. When a prophet loses one's temper, the gift of prophecy, it leaves. He no longer has it. Why would the rabbis of the Talmud say that Moses' gift of prophecy, the prophet that God loved most, why would Moses' gift of prophecy just kind of disappear? Why would it abandon him? Well, we have to think for a second. What's prophecy? Some of us might say it's telling the future. Well, that's not really exactly what it is. A more common explanation would be that the prophet is going to be God's mouthpiece, and God is going to speak through a prophet, and then we're going to hear the message. Okay, well, that I think is a little bit closer. But I think there's even a greater understanding of who a prophet could be. I think God uses a prophet to penetrate despair. Think about that for a second. God uses a prophet to penetrate despair. This idea was developed by a Christian biblical scholar and theologian named Walter Brueggemann that many people who studied a religious studies class ever in college probably read one of his books. And Brueggemann teaches this: the task of prophetic imagination is to cut through the despair and to penetrate the dissatisfied coping that seems to have no end or resolution. In other words, a prophet's job when that ordinary person, penetrates despair, it means that they are igniters of hope, that they are igniters of vision, and they help us find meaning when we're tired of looking, when we're feeling exhausted or hot and starting to schwitz in the tent. Wake up. They are igniters of hope. And I just love that. Who's an igniter of hope for you? Don't answer it out loud. But think about, what could that possibly mean at a time when so many are feeling so beaten? Moses, by striking the rock, he lost his gift of being that kind of igniter. And I think people who share their gifts over and over and over again, and then who might be beaten down by a public, they tend to get burnt out. And we know that's true. There's a lot of people in helping professions and lots of clergy who have left those helping professions and left their congregations because they were feeling exhausted. A lot like you. And they couldn't be out front anymore. They were tired, perhaps like Moses, of feeling perhaps like they were the only one igniting the hope. It can't just be one. We can't wait for another one like a Dr. King or a Rabbi Heschel. Here's the thing. In our approaches to leadership, we can have someone be the igniter of the vision and who then can embrace and engage others in the struggle. And it's crucial if we really believe in this kind of an open tent, this idea where we want anybody to be able to enter and be reflective and be intentional and embrace something that could be meaningful to them and their existence. We have to build not just a big, strong, big tent with lots of entry spaces, but we have to be able to ignite a little bit one another. It can't just come from clergy or a rabbi or a president or your mayor or wherever else you find access. Dr. Brueggemann, in his book, it's called The Prophetic Imagination. I know you're all going to read it now. It'll take you a year. His book, he has this statement and says, the task of prophetic imagination is to cut through the numbness. Think about that. Let that sit for a second. To cut through the numbness, to penetrate the self-deception. I don't know about you, but there are days that I'm feeling really numb. That there's another crisis and tragedy, and it feels like I have nothing else to give. And I think that kind of fatigue is okay for us. Because I know that Shabbat comes, and that's a time of renewal for me. I know that my faith can offer an alternative perception of reality. That's what I think faith does. It's not about following the rules as much as it is giving me an alternative to all of this other stuff that's out in the world. And that alternative perception of a reality helps to build connections between and among us and God, encouraging other prophetic voices to be lifted up, not prophecy. I'm not into people who are saying, yeah, I'm a prophet and here's what's coming. I'm like, well, thanks for calling. And yes, I get those calls. I'm not talking about prophecy. I am talking about prophetic voices. We've had prophets, and the era of prophecy in Jewish tradition has ended. Okay, but prophetic voices to confront the numbness that many of us feel from time to time, the despair that some of us are feeling when we see all of these people with pain and hurt. We confront it with the hope of transforming others to hope, to acts of justice, to care, to empathy. And that's how we learn to be present for other people. You know, Reform Judaism, are there more rabbits back there? Or I'm just going too long. All right, you warned me in the beginning. Let me share the ending of this message. The earlier versions of Reform Judaism, they used to routinely be referred to as prophetic Judaism. Prophetic Judaism. They talked about it all the time. And I think the origins were rooted in these influences from Christians in America in the early part of the 20th century called the social gospels. But there was also a group of Jews who wanted to be less distinctive and more American. And with a new opportunity for equality that often would elude them in Europe, the prophets' call for justice and ethical conduct was compelling for our American ancestors, our American Jewish ancestors. Jews who suffered from unjust treatment found common ground with others to advance justice. I think it's time for us to capture, to lift up our prophetic voices and be the catalysts, to be the agitators, to be the inspirers, to help others lift up their own prophetic voices to confront despair and hopelessness and injustice and mental health challenges and anything that could be bringing us down. So let me leave you with this. And I think this is going to tie into where we're going to end our evening tonight. It's critical to remember that for the Jew and those who are part of our Jewish community, that Egypt isn't just a place. It's not. It's a mindset. Mitzrayim, the Hebrew word for Egypt, I think it's a mindset. And remember, the root letters of Mitzrayim are tsar. And tsar means narrow. It's a place that's confining. Mitzrayim is a place that confines us. It's so narrow, it's hard to stretch. It's hard to be our own true, authentic selves. We're stuck. And it's inhibiting us from being who we are. Or perhaps it's even repressing us. So we have to engage in a struggle that will confront that narrowness, that mindset of Mitzrayim. That mindset can make us our own pharaohs. But we have a choice. That alternative perception I mentioned earlier. We can find our own prophetic voices, bring them together to create deeper encounters, meaningful journeys, and positive change. to our world, but just to ourselves. So much love to you, my prophets. 586, the bottom of the page,